Good evening. We are so excited to welcome you all again to another iteration of our Wiley University Lenten series. This season, as we are in this time of reflection, we are doing the inner work. And we are so excited to bring to you guests, preachers, pastors, activists, scholars from around the country who are sharing on the ideals and the principles of Lent. This evening, I have the pleasure of bringing back our Assistant Director, the Reverend Dr. Jonathan Tennille, who is going to introduce us this evening to our facilitator. Dr. Tennille, how you doing, my brother?
I'm doing just fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, brother. It's good to see you. Take us
Likewise.
away.
Well, um, good evening to all of you, Wiley community, near and far. We are grateful to have with us today, this evening, the Reverend Raquel Gill. Reverend Gill and I have known one another for um, just about almost 10 years. We worked together at different congregations, but we did a pastoral residency together in Brooklyn. She in East Brooklyn, I in Bed-Stuy, where we were able to collaborate and share and learn and grow together as pastors. She now is the Minister for Intercultural Engagement at the Duke University Chapel. She is a scholar, a preacher par excellence, and I'm excited to turn it over to her so that she can share with us this evening on solitude. And so, Reverend Gill, welcome. Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much to the Wiley community. Thank you for having me. To your amazing Dean of the Chapel, Dr. Duffy, who is just a trailblazer in the field, and to the amazing Dr. Tennille, a brother who, again, we go way back many, many, many days of not learning what it means to pastor and to do the work of ministry in the Big Apple. So always glad to see that you are doing well and still doing amazing work. It's my joy, really, to journey with you guys as a part of your Lenten series, discussing the theme of solitude. And so I won't belabor or hold us long. Just want to start with a moment of prayer, and then we'll get right into it. We'll get right into the presentation. Let us pray. Lord, let the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, for you are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen and Ashe. So tonight, when we talk about this idea of solitude, I want to use this particular idea since we're college students on a college campus, right? I work with students who are about your age and some who are a little older, maybe in graduate programs. I want to talk from this thought: in solitude's classroom. In solitude's classroom. So, what are the lessons that we learn about community, about creativity, about scholarship, and about self love? And to the right, I have a quote from one of my sages and ancestors who just continues to inspire and illuminate me, Dr. James Baldwin. This quote comes from Dr. Leah Torrey, who is doing an initiative at Duke called Say the Thing, where she's exploring the interior lives or the inner work that is being done by a lot of Black literary icons. And Baldwin says this: though we do not wholly believe it yet, the interior life is a real life, and the intangible dreams of people have a tangible effect on the world. And so we'll get more into that when we talk about this particular passage that we'll lift up from the life of Jesus tonight. But it's important to know that as you're doing the inner work, that the inner work has some external realities. It has some external effects, right? The intangible work that sometimes you can't see with your hands or touch with your hands, it has some real tangible effects on what you do out in the world. And so we can go to the next slide. But why do we name this in the container of a classroom, right? And it pulls from a quote from one of my favorite authors, writers, thinkers at the moment, Cole Arthur Riley, who has written a beautiful book called This Here Flesh: Spirituality, Liberation, and the Stories That Make Us. Cole is a Black woman, a young woman who lives in, I think, Ithaca, New York. And Cole writes this: solitude can be a profound teacher. It can teach us how to hold ourselves, how to affirm ourselves and listen. How much is the sound of your own voice worth? Right. And so when we talk about solitude's classroom, we talk about that because we believe that solitude can be a profound teacher to us. There are some things that we can only learn about ourselves when we have the space to sit with ourselves, when we have the space and the time and take the time to spend time with ourselves. So you can go to the next slide. But we cannot really talk about solitude or give definition, give shape, give meaning to the word solitude without really talking about the tension of loneliness and isolation that often exists and still persists on many college campuses. Right, on college campuses right now, there appears to be an epidemic of loneliness. This particular photo is it was taken in October, I think, of 2023 at Duke University, where I work. There was a town hall where the U.S. Surgeon General, who is pictured in the center, General Murphy, came to Duke University and is currently on a tour, touring some campuses to really talk about the pervasiveness of loneliness and isolation and the health effects. It is becoming a not just a kind of social crisis, but also very much a health crisis on college campuses throughout the United States. And he's pictured here with Dr. Kate Bowler, who's a professor at Duke, and John Shire, who is the men's basketball coach at Duke University, who is he succeeded Coach K, the famous Coach K. And they had an amazing conversation about the report that was released last year from General Murphy. And some studies have linked that loneliness can cause an increased risk for heart disease, for stroke, for dementia, and for premature death for older Americans and older citizens, right? But research has also shown a correlation between loneliness and suicidality, particularly among Gen Z. And so General Murphy released a report showing the various dangers of loneliness and suggesting ways that the nation can address the epidemic, beginning with increasing public awareness and designing social infrastructures. So designing these things that help us build connection. So it's important that as we talk about solitude and what it means to spend time with yourself and by yourself, that we also hold in tension this idea that on many campuses and in many spaces in general, many people, as a result of moving out of this post-quarantine, this post-isolated world, find themselves battling extreme loneliness and are really trying to figure out how to combat that feeling of loneliness. We can go to the next slide. And so the question tonight is, what is solitude? What does solitude look like in a culture of chronic loneliness and isolation, right? When people are naming, I feel by myself, right? I can be in a room full of people and I still feel pervasively alone. What does it look like to practice, right? The gift, to practice the discipline, to practice the act of solitude. And so I have a kind of three-wing definition that I kind of lift up tonight around solitude that I think is, open for reflection, open, for feedback, or when I take what works for you and then what kind of doesn't, as we always say in the South, you kind of eat the meat and spit out the bones. First, I believe that solitude is a healthy choice to possibly be alone and use that alone time for reflection or enjoyment of one's own company. A healthy choice, right? If you don't hear anything else that I say tonight, please hear this, that it is a choice. So our brothers and sisters who are in the carceral system, right, who are incarcerated, right, when they experience solitary confinement, that is not solitude, right? That is punitive, right? It is a form of punishment. A choice is taken away from them. And oftentimes that choice does not lead to their benefit. It does not lead to their betterment, right? It often leads to their detriment, right? So the first thing you have to ask when you're choosing to spend time alone and choosing to spend time with yourself is this particular choice rooted in my own health? Is it rooted in my own wellness? Do I find myself in a space where I really want to be in the company of others, but I'm just kind of experiencing some social anxiety or angst, or I'm just nervous about how the interactions might happen, or I'm just afraid a bit to kind of step out of my comfort zone? Is this particular choice rooted from a place of health, right? Or is it kind of rooted in wanting to kind of maintain control and maintain my own creature comforts, right? Secondly, it is a charge to be fully present for yourself so that you can be fully present for others. So it's a choice. and it's also a charge, right? And you literally see the battery there. Your alone time, in order for it to be a space of solitude, I think there should be some recharging, some re-energizing that you feel, right? You should feel a kind of boost of sorts, right? To be able to go out into the world, and the time that you're spending alone, it allows you to be better in community. But if you find yourself in your room or in your residence hall and you're alone a lot, and that space of loneliness actually has you feeling more isolated, you have to ask yourself, okay, is this solitude, or is this really a space of isolation? And then lastly, I would say it's a commitment. It is a commitment to learn yourself so that you can better love yourself as you are loved by your creator, right? You cannot learn something or someone that you don't spend time with. You cannot love someone that you don't spend time with. And if we can believe that about other people, we have to also believe that about ourselves, right? That in order to better learn ourselves and in order to better love ourselves, we have to create space where we're spending time with ourselves. So solitude in a culture of loneliness is a choice, right? It is a charge, it is a re-energizing, and it is a commitment, right? A commitment to love myself and to learn myself so that I can better love myself. And so you can go to the next slide. But in our current culture, we often turn to Eastern traditions when we're talking about solitude and what it means to spend time with ourselves, what it means to contemplate. So either we turn to the East, or either in an American context, we turn to a lot of models and constructs of whiteness, right? And so these are the common imagery. This is the common imagery that we see of solitude. It is luxury. It is being able to take a lot of vacation time. It is being able to spend money to go out into the woods and go in nature, cabins and resorts, and being able to just go to the top of the highest peak of the highest mountain, and just having the capacity to just spend so much unlimited time and unlimited energy with yourself, right? So these are the common imagery, the images that we see, right? But if we go to the next slide, I in particularly wanted to lift up a passage in the Gospel of Mark. In this kind of this, it is a Bible study. Mark chapter 4, and I don't have to read it, right, for the sake of time. But at some point, I encourage you to read it yourself. But I'll just kind of tell the story briefly. Jesus has just finished teaching on various parables, and he instructs the disciples to travel across a large body of water, knowing that there is someone who's in need of healing on the other side. And so the disciples are traveling with Jesus, and all of a sudden they encounter a storm. And as they're sailing, a storm begins to form and take shape as they are traveling, right? They didn't know this was coming, right? It wasn't like they had a weatherman or, forecasting. Literally, as they are traveling on the water, the storm begins to take shape and form while they are on the boat, right? And it's such a violent storm that the waves began to push in and swamp the boat. The very experienced sailors, right? Because if you know anything about the disciples, many of them were people of the water, or not. They were of the lower class in this kind of Palestinian context, right? So many of them, there are people they're very familiar with the water or whatnot, because they work with fish, right? And so they're very experienced, but even they're afraid, right? And they begin to wonder: are we really going to survive? Are we going to make it, right? The waves are so strong that they're crashing in and they're filling the boat. And in the midst of all of this, Jesus is in the back of the boat, sleeping on a pillow. Jesus is asleep, sound asleep, and is completely undisturbed by it all. And so they disturb him. They wake him up and they ask Jesus, do you not care? Are you not concerned that we are that we're drowning, right? We're not sure we're going to survive. And scripture says that Jesus got up and gave orders to the wind, saying, "Peace, be still." And there was a great calm, right? And there's much that has been expounded upon about this particular passage. But what are some things we can take away about solitude in this particular passage? And it is that despite the common images that we see around solitude, the truth is, beloved, that sometimes the conditions of our lives will not always be conducive for solitude, right? Sometimes you're going to be in the midst of life's storms, of life's difficulties. Life is going to feel chaotic. You're going to be in the hustle and the bustle of life. And in the midst of that, you have to make time for solitude anyway. right? Life may not always be a resort or an escape from our lives, right? Solitude cannot always be that we're trying to leave our lives and trying to get this kind of moment or days away to kind of escape our realities. But sometimes it is to make space, to have a moment to ourselves in the midst of the chaos and the hustle of life. So it's taking a few minutes in the morning before you start your day. It's taking a few minutes in the middle of your day. It is pausing when you feel yourself becoming overwhelmed or stressed, and really recentering yourself by closing your eyes and focusing on your breath, right? Sometimes you cannot stop the hustle and bustle of life. And even in the midst of that, you have to be able to find solitude. You have to be able to sleep in the midst of the storms, right? And so Jesus calls the winds and the waves to practice what he had just practiced. Right, so they wake him up. Jesus, do you not care that we're dying? And immediately Jesus gets up and he says, "Peace." Right, some translations say, "Peace, be still." Right, and I never paid attention to that until this week. Right, when you're consciously thinking about solitude, that Jesus had just called the winds and the waves to practice what he was already practicing. Jesus had just spent so much time practicing the act of stillness. And now he is able to tell, right, the forces of nature to be still. Right. It is from his posture of internal peace that he is able to call and name into being external peace. And you remember the James Baldwin quote that I said in the beginning, right? That your inner work, your inner world will have external realities, right? Your inner work, it will always have an impact on your outer world, right? And sometimes we cannot create atmospheres of calm around us, right? Because we struggle with creating atmospheres of calm and peace within us, right? So solitude is a way that you create stillness within you, right? So that you can bring forth stillness around you, even in the midst of chaos, even when so much is going on in the hustle of your campus, right? You can be that calm in the midst of that chaos, right? Because you have done that inner work, right? To be able to bring that out. And so we can go to the next slide. And so three kinds of things, or four things, I should say, that solitude teaches us as we kind of wrap up, right? I want us to remember, again, for us as Black folks who are marginalized folks, we are a communal people. Communalism matters to us. So solitude is not always non-communal for oppressed people. Solitude, right, can be an existence or an engagement beyond the societal pressures and the gaze of performance. Again, Jesus was with his disciples, but he was asleep in the midst of that. He had a moment of peace while he was also with his folks, right? So if you think about your own life, any kind of existence that you have where you don't have to perform, right? But you can just be around people and you can just sit and just be, and there's no pressure to do. Right. For Black people, the Black church has provided a kind of life beyond the white gaze. So white people are not overly concerned. They're not overly invested. They're not overly present. Right. We can be able to move and exist, right, beyond the eyes of whiteness. Right. Which is why the Black church has played the significant role it has played. Women have often gathered together, right? Black women in particular have often gathered together to have their own spaces beyond the male gaze, right? Beyond, right, the opinions, the perspectives, the ideas, and beyond the looks and the concerns, the standards of men, right? Those who are LGBTQ and queer, right? We've had to create spaces beyond the heteronormative gaze, beyond the gaze of heterosexuality, right? That allows us to exist and to be in community amongst ourselves. So you kind of have to ask yourself, what are my communities where I get to just be, right? I don't have to perform anything, but I can fully be myself. And then the next slide, solitude teaches true community. Solitude also teaches creativity, right? So I don't know, some of us are there because we want to do STEM, we maybe want to do English. Some of us are artists, right? You want to do music, you want to do fashion, you want to do, visual art, photography, all of these different things. Well, baby, you can really tap into another measure of creativity if you allow yourself to get still. and I'm probably aging myself. I know Reverend Duffy and Dr. Duffy and Dr. Tennille probably know these two figures that are kind of pictured here, which is Lil Jon and Andre 3000. I guess if I could use a reference, Lil Jon was on Usher's Super Bowl performance. That's why all of us millennials were very hyped and excited about Usher performing for the Super Bowl, because Usher, Lil Jon, and Luda had to do it again. So, but Lil Jon also has a meditation album. And it is really good. Don't sleep on it. As a matter of fact, you can't sleep on it, because I think the last track is a sleep meditation. But Lil Jon says this on his particular meditation album: I am someone who practices meditation. I'm also an artist that has been listening to my inner voice for years. I try to channel that voice into my music and creative projects. And when I must do something that requires my dedicated attention, I turn to meditation. Before I do a DJ set for thousands of people, I know I must bring my A game. So before I start my sets, I find a quiet place where I can sit for a few moments by myself. I try to boost my focus with meditation. So I know it's midterm season, and I know some of y'all are getting tests, exams, papers. I encourage you, right, to kind of tap into solitude, to tap into sitting with yourself, right, as a way to kind of boost your focus, right? Lil Jon is telling you that in order for him to turn up each night the way he does in club after club, bar after bar, it's not the alcohol, it's not all the other substances, but it is really meditation. So he has to turn down in order, in order to be able to really turn up, right? And so Andre 3000 as well has been transparent. I'm a huge Andre 3000 fan, fellow Gemini. I think you can't really talk about mysticism or hip hop without talking about this particular person. But he's been very transparent about his diagnosis with social anxiety and hypersensitivity, and it's pulled him into a more secluded life. But he's also spoken of the need to balance an unhealthy desire for extreme isolation with a need to be alone, right? That allows him to tap into his creative elements. So Andre is often considered one of the greatest rappers alive, and he credits that and attunes a lot of that to the time that he really spends by himself and in solitude. So it will boost your creativity, right? And so next slide. So solitude, it teaches us community, teaches us creativity, it teaches us scholarship, which is why, right, we are engaging tonight anyway. You are here because you are scholars, right? And we were able to hear an amazing talk a few weeks ago in Los Angeles from two professors, Dr. Anthony Penn and Dr. Brad Braxton, from this particular book about being human. And in this book, Dr. Brad Braxton really talks about how his scholarship has really been an act of solitude. He says, as we both know, scholarly activities such as reading and writing involve serial and protracted solitude. It was the Professor Fred Craddock who suggests that it's a blessing when one's desk becomes one's altar, right? So when your desk becomes a place where you are also experiencing the worship of God, it doesn't just have to be chapel, it doesn't just have to be church, right? It doesn't just have to be Bible study, but your desk can literally become your altar. It can become the place where you're giving God your best because you're giving your studies your best, right? And so in thinking about that, how can I see my studying, my time of studying, as an act of solitude, as an act of spending time with myself and spending time with God? So I encourage you to take a picture of your desk or look at the space where you create to study regularly and ask, what can I bring into my study space to make it more peaceful, to make it more reflective, to make it more prayerful, right? As I study and as I engage in this particular work, right? Sometimes in order to be able to find meaning in what we're doing, right, we have to be able to create the spaces to do it better. So how can you curate your desk, right? The place where you study to be a space of solitude for you. Right. So solitude teaches us true community. It teaches us creativity. It teaches us scholarship. And then lastly, solitude teaches us everyday acts of self-love, right? Again, you can't learn to love yourself if you don't spend time with yourself, right? And we can't play it here, but this is one of my favorite artists, Chicago-based artist, which is Reverend Tennille's hometown, Jamila Woods. I just love her work. It's beautiful work. And my favorite song that I listen to a lot of mornings is Holy. And I have some lyrics here from that particular song, but it literally starts off and it captivated me when I first heard it. She says, I woke up this morning with my mind set on loving me, right? I'm not lonely, I'm alone, and I'm holy by my own. And this is the posture you have to take in the practice of solitude, right? If you are lonely, name that and say that, because loneliness is real. But when you come to a place where you're realizing you're practicing the act of solitude, it is not about loneliness. It is recognizing the holiness of your own company, right? In an anti-Black world, liberation is a robust and a rebellious love of self. So, in a world that tells you that it is impossible to love yourself, that you should not love yourself as a Black body, as a queer body, as a disabled body, as a whatever body, right? Or when it is an act of liberation and freedom to learn how to love yourself, right? So, solitude will teach you everyday acts of self love, how to love yourself in the everyday. And so, that's the question I leave you with tonight. What are some intentions you set or goals that you have this Lent to better love yourself? I know we are moving towards how to love God better, but as God's beloved creation, what are some intentions or goals that you have set this year to better love you? Right. And if you haven't set those goals, I encourage you to take some time to sit with yourself, right? And allow God to show you how you can better love you. And lastly, I'll leave you with some resources. I have my email here. I would love to continue this conversation, answer any questions or any reflections, any thoughts. I would love to be able to chat. I also have some resources here. I know that I named loneliness, isolation. I even mentioned suicidality. The Student Health Counseling and Wellness Center at Wiley, I have the link listed there. I have the College Mental Health Toolkit, which is an amazing website from the Mental Health Coalition. It is a toolkit specifically designed for college students that is free. I have the Boost Focus Meditation by Lil Jon. So again, if you need to study this weekend or Monday, check it out. Reverend Tennille said he checked it out and it was dope. So that gives me the thumbs up that I need. So I encourage you to try it on YouTube. And I also have another free meditation app, the Insight Timer app. My partner uses this app, and so by proxy, I use it a lot as well. But it's an amazing free meditation app. And I encourage you to check it out. It may work for you, it may not. And I have 2 IG links. I really wanted to talk about some ways that Black people are moving outside and in nature as a way of solitude, but time, of course, wouldn't allow. So I have the IG link to Black People Who Hike, which is an amazing resource. I encourage you to get outside. If you see in a lot of these pictures, folks are outside, and sometimes you can really tap into yourself by getting outside. And then the Nap Ministry on IG. Rest is a part of solitude. So I encourage you to check out Trisha Hersey's work. Rest is Resistance. It's an amazing resource, and I think it'll be quite helpful for you. And so I'll close with a final quote from Dr. Howard Thurman, an amazing sage who teaches us a lot about solitude as well. Solitude is the place we find God and our truest selves. Solitude is where we can find the inner resources to face hatred and oppression and to survive intact as children of God. So I pray that solitude becomes a space where you find the inner resources to fight the outer world, right? And to survive with your joy, with your wholeness, with your peace intact, knowing that you are a child of God. Amen.
Amen. And Ashe. Dr. Gill, that was incredible. We had a master class on solitude today, and I am so grateful for your ministry and what you brought to our community. We also want to take a moment and acknowledge the members of the Division of Student Affairs at Wiley University under the direction of Dr. Danielle Brooks, There are partners, and they have been in collaboration with us this evening and are watching. So, those of you who are with Student Affairs, feel free to drop a note in the chat function if you have any questions or if you have any words of encouragement. As Dr. Gill has shared so much of her work as well as her scholarship in this moment, we would definitely love to hear from you. Uh, there was a comment from Sharice Sands.
See it. Yeah.
Said, embracing solitude and silence provides a unique chance to deepen your intimacy with Jesus. It allows you to detach from your daily responsibilities and interactions with others, creating a space solely for attending to the Lord. In solitude, the emphasis is not on making things happen. Instead, it's about bringing your authentic self to the Lord, seeking a quiet and focused communion with Him. Dr.
Yes.
Chin, Dr. Chin, I'm going to throw this first question out at you. We heard an amazing message earlier this week from the Reverend Dr. Charles Goodman, who talked about Jonah being asleep on a boat. And we heard from Reverend Gill hearing about Jesus being asleep on the boat. Can you help us make that connection and the difference that's found in their ability to sleep and slumber?
Um, I'm still kind of sitting with what Reverend Gill brought out of the text. We always think about Jesus waking up and speaking to the storm, but not really considering. Thank you for helping me really kind of reconsider how Jesus not just speaks to the storm, but tells the storm to do what I'm doing. Like be still, be quiet. How that inner work on the inside is kind of exudes on the outside. I was just that kind of floored me, so I'm stuck on that there. But hearing how in Jonah's situation, like Dr. Goodman um, brought alive, while Jonah was asleep, while everyone else was kind of a fit about the storm. Jonah's sleep was because Jonah was kind of trying to escape, get to where he wanted to be. Whereas Jesus was, I guess, a moment of solitude, really, and speaking to the conditions around him. Jonah was unaware of the conditions around him because he felt, as long as I'm not going to Nineveh, I don't care where I am, right? So even in the midst of the storm, he was okay. But that the dichotomy of both being asleep in the storm, but that experience of Jesus saying to the storm, "Hey, chill out, be like me," and how reflecting on how our own inner work can shape our outside experience.
That's profound. Profound, Dr. Sunil. Reverend Gill, I have this question for you as we prepare to close. You have brought to us this idea of solitude with all of these strengths. And usually we find so much negativity as it relates to being alone or having to be put aside or not be around community. But you brought this idea in terms of community being a sacred space for Black people. And I would love to hear your own personal experience of how you have found solitude, not necessarily by yourself, but within community, especially venturing in this Lenten journey.
Oh, absolutely. I think that was kind of why I felt, a huge need to mention that first. Of I actually think you find your true community when you're able to kind of, those people you can kind of sit around and do nothing with. Right. There's not you can sit in silence in an apartment in a room we're not for hours and not saying anything, or we're not, and y'all are alone together. Y'all are, quiet together, and that being a kind of solitude, right? And when you have those kinds of communities, whether it be friendships, whether it be kinships, whether it be romantic partnerships, platonic partnerships, even family, or not, that really can form a kind of true community. I was really captivated by that digital exhibit that I referenced by Tyler Smith, of all of those pictures. If you see Black people just together, like, and he named it solitude, but there was no photos. There were no photos in that entire exhibit. If you find it online at I think the Hype Museum or whatnot, there were no photos where Black people were alone. Now, it's either children with parents, it's elders and younger people, the very intergenerational aspect, even of just getting together and just allowing yourself to not be a human doing, but a human being, to just be. And so for me, I've been able to find that in, my sorority. I've been able to find that, of course, in church. I've been able to find that with my cousins, right? We do an annual Juneteenth cookout. That is a form of solitude, of deep solitude, when I, for me, when I, and then just friendships, group chats, right? Or not, of sorts, or not, and even in workspaces. When I, I work at a predominantly white institution, so we have Black affinity groups, right? We have queer affinity groups. So and those are real spaces, I think, of true community, that have also just been sources of solitude for me in a kind of communal life, right? And so I think it's really important, right? It's particularly in a culture where people are saying, I am lonely. I feel I don't have anybody, to really be able to tap into community, and to really be able to find those spaces, where you just don't have to lean into societal pressures and you don't have to perform.
Can I also add? I
Go
think
ahead, Doc.
when you spoke with about this kind of idea of communal solitude,
Mm,
um, two things came to my mind. I'll never forget when I was in seminary, we went on a trip to DC for one of our classes, and one of our LGBTQ brothers, after like day three, he said, "Listen, I love y'all, but I got to get around my people, right?" And so he said, "I got to leave y'all for a minute because it's just something about being around my people, right?" And so he wanted to find a LGBTQ space where he
mhm,
could just be without having the pressure of, I guess putting some of that down, right? And so
mhm.
I thought about that, and I thought about how as
So,
pastors, preachers, ministers, um, I know when I was back home in Chicago, I had a group of brothers, friends that were pastors, and on Sundays that was our time together. Right, there was
mhm,
no agenda, no plan.
mhm,
It was like a space of solitude where we were just able to kind of breathe and be ourselves without the pressures of being preacher, pastor, or anything like that. And so those are two kind of illustrations because I think when we hear solitude, we automatically go to by ourselves, but
mhm,
that communal aspect I think is so powerful.
mm.
There's one point that I'll hopefully close out on, Reverend Gill, that you brought to us. You talked about the white gaze, the male gaze,
Mhm,
the heterosexual gaze,
mhm,
and I wonder how often we operate in those gazes ourselves.
mm,
And the idea of how many times do we walk into a space and the space shifts
mm,
because of our presence, and
mm,
not positively, but negatively.
mhm.
Where is it that we walk in and a student group has to shelter in place
Oh yeah.
or shield what it is they're discussing because of fear of that gaze? And so you just brought home this idea that we're looking for safe spaces
Yeah.
in all of the areas in which we live and operate, but we have to be conscious of the times where we are bringing that patriarchal,
Mhm,
that white supremacist gaze onto people with whom we say we love and
mhm.
treasure,
Oh,
or
absolutely.
that we're telling, hey, watch out for that gaze that's so oppressive, when we're the ones who are in fact
Yeah.
gaze.
No. Yeah. No. It's very easy to do, I think, even in our positions, right? How many, in working with students, do we not allow them to exist and just be, and what that looks like? And sometimes the politics of respectability, right? Or not, our cultures, we're really big on deference, on respect, right? On these different kind of things. And sometimes students have to go through all of these filters just to be able to talk to us in the way that they need to talk to us. And so I have to, allow myself to undo some of the work that white supremacy has done on me. That students don't have to be a particular way. They don't always have to present a particular way. That if there's a need that needs to be met, I want them to communicate that to me however they need to communicate it. And so allowing that. So it's constant work that I have to do to undo it within myself, because sometimes there are no white eyes looking on me. I'm putting those eyes there or not, because of the ways that I've been conditioned and socialized to move throughout the world. So it's always a continual work. And I think that's the work of Lent too.
Well, thank you so much, Reverend Gill, Dr. Snell. You all have been phenomenal in sharing this evening. Just wanted to quickly remind you of the many resources that we have available as we are in this season. We know that many members of our community are part of this time of fasting, this time of solitude, this time of repentance and prayer. We hope that you have been in a season of moderation and community building, and most importantly, spiritual discipline. And if you're looking for more resources, please feel free to visit our link at bit.ly/WileyLent24. There you'll receive an email that has some extra resources just to re-up as we continue toward this trek of resurrection. Going to ask you to join us again next week, same time, same place. And we again thank Reverend Gill for leading us this evening. You all have a great rest of the evening.